Coming up next in This Week in Computer Hardware, NVIDIA's Titan V. What do you get with a $3,000 GPU? AMD's Adrenalin keeps getting better. 20 terabyte hard drives are practically here, and HP's patching keyloggers in 460 laptop models. All that more coming up next on TWiCH.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiCH.
Bandwidth for TWiCH is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is TWiCH, This Week in Computer Hardware, episode 444, recorded December 14th, 2017. NVIDIA Titan V. This GPU is not for you, gamer.
This episode of This Week in Computer Hardware is brought to you by the Ring Video Doorbell. With Ring, you can see and talk to anyone at your door from anywhere in the world using your smartphone. It's like caller ID for your home. Go to ring.com/twitch and get up to $150 off of a Ring security kit. And by WordPress. Plans start at just $4 a month. Get 15% off your brand new website today at wordpress.com/twitch. And by Tracker, a coin-sized tracking device that pairs with your smartphone and keeps you from losing your most valued possessions. Visit thetracker.com/twitch to save 20% off of your order.
Welcome to TWiCH, This Week in Computer Hardware, TWiCH weekly show that aims to bring you a whole steaming pile of hot hardware news. We love the mobile, we love the laptops, we love the desktops. We especially love the never decreasing prices of graphics cards, especially in the holiday shopping season. And I, for one, will not be discussing net neutrality today until I do. Ryan, will you be discussing net neutrality today?
I can, but only if you want me to. I don't want to get in these big political discussions. I sent out some tweets.
Political.
I had some positive comments. I had some negative comments. It was a very mixed bag. But you know,
I would like.
I
to
watched
say
it
a
all
lot
on the
of
live stream, and
bag.
there was more excitement than I thought would be occurring because of the like bomb threat call in, I guess, that occurred.
Really?
Where they kicked everybody out of the room for 10 minutes.
Drama, pathos.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Some of that.
We won't get into the net neutrality thing. Let's just say I think the reaches will be far more far-reaching than a lot of people are assuming. But we will find out.
I agree.
Whether we want to or not. And also the lawsuits, I think, are just getting started. We talked a bunch about Snapdragon 845 and the new 835 powered laptops. Have you gotten any more hands-on time with the Windows Snapdragon laptops?
Yeah, I have. I've been able to use both the HP machine and the Asus machine. The HP being the detachable, the Asus being the convertible. The HP is kind of like the Surface-esque type design, detachable keyboard, and then the Asus is more like the yoga style, folded in half type mentality. Both use identical hardware, so they both kind of perform the same in my experience. And battery life is really good on both of the machines, I would say, right? It's going to be really interesting, right? I know you guys talked about this last week, but having been there, listening to people, listening to a lot of other media and analysts kind of talk about what their opinions are on these things, it's obvious to me that there are two camps. There are people who are going to be very concerned about the performance delta that exists between Snapdragon 835 and Intel Core whatever running Windows, because that performance delta does exist. It's a
fact, and it may be a bigger fact if you upgrade Windows and run, it's the emulation I'm also very concerned about. The native apps shouldn't be too bad. The universal apps shouldn't be too bad, but we don't know what the emulation is going to add in terms of processor cost. But you're talking about like the delta between like an entry-level Core i3 or an APU and an AMD APU and say, a Core i3 or whatever currently non-existent higher powered AMD laptop processor might be.
Yeah, the target that Qualcomm has always had for these parts is the Core M3 product family, right? So the bottom end of Intel's notebook line. Which is still the target, and it seems like a reasonable assertion that those two performance levels are going to be in proximity to each other. Right. So if you're the kind of person that wasn't concerned about that, like a Core M3, which is what the Surface Pro bottom level SKU ships with, the Dell XPS 13 2-in-1 ships with. And so there's a performance delta that exists between those and like the Core i3 and Core i5 systems that are out there in the notebook world. And so that same thing's going to exist here. So the interesting discussion will be is the camp that is concerned about the performance, and then there's the camp that's going to be concerned about battery life and this connectivity stuff, right? And I think the connectivity thing is interesting, but it's probably less compelling to more people than the battery life, because connectivity will come to the Intel machines, right? You know, we saw the Surface Pro LTE announced, all that stuff. So like Intel is seeing the writing on the wall that LTE connectivity is kind of going to be a big deal. So they are going to make sure that's included in as many of their systems as possible. The battery life is a significant difference, right? I've been able to use the machines for several days, and you know, I can go an entire weekend and not plug in the laptop, right? I can leave it in my backpack for 3 days over a long weekend, and a couple of days at the office where I don't use it, and pull it out, and it still had a reasonable expectation it's going to have battery left in it, and it's going to just turn on. It doesn't have to go into hibernate. It's going to stay in that low power sleep state, and it does work. It functions as they have claimed it's going to function. So the question I have for consumers and for you and anybody else who's listening is, we know the value metric for performance. We have a general idea that people will pay X% more for X performance more. What we really haven't seen on the market yet is, will people pay X% for X battery life improvement, right? It's never really been an option. Hey, platform A is this battery life, platform B is this battery life. Like, that's never been the spec that they push out at you first, and this is the one they're going to be doing that at. So it's kind of a difficult proposition because it's not flashy, it's not sexy like new screens, new cameras, new capabilities, right? It's like, hey, if you forget to plug your laptop in overnight, you can still take it to your, CES the next day and have capability to do your work, right? Like that's to me, in my circumstance, what makes the most sense. You come home from a late dinner at a conference or a show, you put your book bag down, you're too tired to take it out and find the power cord and do all that stuff, but you wake up in the morning and take a shower and you go, oh no, I forgot to plug it in. You open it up, it still has 60-something% battery life, and you can go throughout the day. That to me is the value prop, and I just don't know how many other people are going to need that and or recognize that they need it enough to buy in.
We shall find out. I mean, it's going to be interesting. I'm always, there's the hype, there's the reality, and I'm very, very curious about the application support, which has gotten a lot better in the Windows Store, but I can totally see myself upgrading Windows. I'm curious. I'm very, very curious. I'm also curious what sort of terrible options are going to be available for the data plans on the LTE in that.
True.
Not to suggest
when I was using mine, when I was using mine, I took the SIM out of my iPad that I'd had a grandfathered unlimited AT&T data plan in, and just put it in that and have used it. And I haven't really had to think about it, right?
This is good.
But that will be a big question. Is like, how are you going to buy it? Are you going to buy it from a carrier? Are you going to buy it at Best Buy? They're not going to sell any Wi-Fi only models, right? But you don't have to activate LTE if you don't want to. But in my opinion, you're kind of missing one of the big selling points of what these options are.
Yeah, I don't know. It's been interesting because I was tweeting with Sasha Sagan about this a few months ago. The way that all of the carriers have structured their data plans indicates that they have very little interest in high data users, or they want to minimize. You have a grandfathered and unlimited plan. Everybody and their uncle right now says our data plans are unlimited, and what they really mean is you paid for a certain amount of gigabytes, and as soon as you get to that level, we're going to throttle you down to 128K. Which technically an unlimited amount at 128K is technically unlimited, but it's functionally unusable. And I get from a marketing standpoint or from a business standpoint why they do that, right? Because you don't want somebody connecting their home line to your all you can eat wireless plan and pulling terabytes and terabytes of data through Netflix and whatever else they're doing. That's a reasonable thing. But the flip side is I used to be able to, when I blew through 20 gigabytes at CES, uploading and downloading video or moving stuff around, I would then be able to turn around and buy additional gigabytes of data, and they've completely removed those options. And they are, continuing to do things that make it more and more awkward to pull additional data through. So I think it's curious that we have these LTE laptops, which by nature would tend to be data sucky, to use a highly technical term, showing up at a time when the carriers are less and less interested in moving large amounts of data on a monthly basis. I'm curious, man. I'm very, 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 very curious. I am also curious about the Titan V, the world's first consumer Volta GPU with HBM2. Jim Tanis wrote it up for PC but I was shocked. Even for a product only available from NVIDIA, I was shocked at the pricing on this. $2,999, 12 gigabytes of HMB2 memory, 5,120 CUDA cores. Say it again, 5,120 CUDA cores. And a 1,455 megahertz boost clock. This thing's a beast. Like 110 teraflops of maximum compute performance. I mean, they call it a consumer graphics card, but this is like calling, a Lamborghini a commuter vehicle. I mean, this is probably more practical. It's close than a Lamborghini. But this thing's this thing's a beast. This is not a gaming card by any normal definition of a gaming card, unless you're the guy who commutes to the grocery store in a Lamborghini with a trailer, because you can only fit like a sandwich in the trunk of a Lamborghini.
You're the
Who's
guy
gonna buy this?
So the target for this is not gaming, right? Like you said, right. It's targeted at developers. It's targeted at machine learning guys, people who are maybe prototyping or building software applications. For GPU compute workloads that don't want to go through the hassle or don't have the capability to integrate their stuff on big server farms or want to get involved with cloud computing based, implementations of GPU compute from Amazon or Microsoft or what have you. And this gives them the flexibility to design on their own system because it's an add-in card. You can use it as your graphics card, all that type of stuff, right? It does do gaming. It will game. But for $3,000, I think NVIDIA wanted to release this card because they had released the server version, the Tesla V100. It's been, available for a little while. They basically, come they've saturated enough of that space. Like, okay, now what do we go to next? It's these smaller developers, these indie guys, or companies that are willing to buy these cards for their workstations. And NVIDIA wanted to make sure that people didn't make the assumption this was just an overpriced gaming card. So by pricing it at $3,000, they tried to take it out of the realm of possibility to be a gaming card. But also, if you notice, it's called the NVIDIA Titan V. It's not called the NVIDIA GeForce GTX Titan V. If you look back at the previous Titan cards, it was the GeForce GTX Titan XP. Right, so it kind of had this mixture of being branded a GeForce card, which is a gaming brand, being branded Titan, which is its unique kind of cut the middle gaming compute professional workload. So by kind of removing that branding and raising the price, they're making a very clear statement about what the target audience is for the card. It's impressive. It's the first add-in card with display outputs, which makes it useful for us that has display outputs or that has Volta GPU on it, right? So it's the first experience I've been able to get with a Volta-based graphics card. Now, I want to be clear, NVIDIA didn't send these out. They didn't sample us. We bought it. We paid $29.99 plus tax and plus shipping to get one of these cards in, just because we needed to know. In a similar way. And actually, if you go to the homepage, there's actually a review. The first part of our review is up there too. We wanted to know, in a similar vein to when AMD launched the Frontier Edition cards, how this might translate into what the future of gaming cards will be like, right? Can we estimate gaming performance of any upcoming Volta-based graphics cards using the Titan V? It's got its sexy little champagne color. It's built essentially identically to all the Founders Editions cards.
Sure.
The cooler's upgraded. It's got all copper fins instead of aluminum fins on the vapor chamber. But a couple of things that are interesting. Actually, if you look at that spec table, two things that are interesting, right? You already pointed out the 5,120 GPU cores is well above the next best part from NVIDIA. The clock speeds are a little bit lower, 100 to 200 megahertz, depending on if you're looking at the base or the boost clock. But look at the ROP count there. The raster operators are the same between the Titan XP and the Titan V, which is interesting because that it's part of a balancing act between how much compute do you need to get shading done if you're gaming versus how much work do you need to have done on the pixels for anti-aliasing and stuff on the post end. That's what ROPs are responsible for. Excuse me. And the Titan XP had a balance of 3840 to 96. This puts the emphasis much higher on the compute side, indicating that perhaps, again, another reason NVIDIA is not emphasizing gaming for this particular card, right?
Right.
So that's another way to look at it from a specification standpoint. It's also note the memory interface. This is the HBM2, right? So this is the first time we've seen an add-in card that we can test using gaming that has HBM2 from NVIDIA. It's 12 gigs instead of 16. 16 is what the full size GV100 in the Tesla cards offers. But they basically disable one of the HBM stacks on the module in order to lower the memory interface, lower the capacity, lower performance a little bit, create some kind of differentiation between it and the even more expensive than $3,000, Tesla branded cards. You can scroll through a bunch of other like gaming performance stuff. The general consensus I had after testing this guy is that it's about 20% faster than a Titan XP.
Wow.
It's about 50% faster than a GTX 1080 Ti. And it's about 80% faster than a GTX 1080, to give you some scale, right? So it's actually a pretty impressive boost over current top shipping. And we say that knowing that first, the price per dollar ratio doesn't make any sense. You should not buy this for gaming. But I would expect at least the gaming iteration of this card, if when it comes out, to be running at higher clock speeds, probably as well. Maybe being that there's more performance left on the table here than we see, right? Maybe they enable all 128 raster operators on it as well. We get a little bit more performance that way. So in terms of just theorizing about what the performance actually looks like, that's kind of where we're running at, right? So that's actually a good table to look at, right? In Fallout 4 at 4K. You can see the 20% edge, the 50%, the 82, and then about 75% edge over the Vega 64, the current top performing AMD part. So, had this card come out at $1,500, there would be, I think, a groundswell of still super high-end enthusiasts that want to buy this for gaming, because you're getting a performance boost over the $1,200 Titan XP.
Sure.
It's still a 250 watt TDP card. It actually used a little bit less power than that. It's an interesting discussion. If you guys want to read the story, you can see more about that. So from a gaming perspective, it actually games really well, just not for $3,000, which again is what NVIDIA is trying desperately to make us. They're probably really annoyed that this was the first story we posted about the card we bought, but we bought it. We can do whatever the hell we want. The next piece that we're working on now, Ken is dutifully typing away on, is the workstation GPU compute testing of this card, right? So the thing about this GPU is not only does it have 5,120 CUDA cores, but it has 640 tensor cores in it as well that are basically exclusively used for machine learning applications. And it's one of the big things that NVIDIA built into it for its huge machine learning, artificial intelligence, deep learning push that it's on. So none of the gaming stuff is going to utilize any of that. It takes up a significant amount of die space, and I'm curious to see in our workload, double precision and stuff that maybe uses tensor cores, if we can actually show any benefit to that in comparison. So it's been an interesting week. This was a total shock to me. Like, I had no pre-knowledge that this card was going to be launched. I was at the Qualcomm event, and I was walking to dinner, got an email, emailed to people, said, hey, you're going to send us one to review? They said immediately, absolutely not. So we bought one and wanted to do some testing. I know. I've seen people, pictures on Reddit of people getting like 4 of these installed into a system. I think So people are nuts. They're going to buy whatever they want. But there are no, if you look at the pictures of the card, there's no SLI connectors on it. So you can't run multi-GPU in the way you're thinking. It actually has NV Link connectors.
And 50-watt card, too. I mean, this is actually an excuse for that 800 to 1,200-watt power supply you've been looking for.
Finally. So I'll just end it with that. Like, it's a super impressive-looking card, both in terms of performance and what have you. But at $3,000, you need to have a business reason to really want this, and or you bought Bitcoin in 2010 or something like that, right? Like, so those are the two types of persons that should be looking at buying the Titan V. An impressive card for a very specific audience.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Interesting article. You know, the first half of it's a little, it's not particularly technical, so but it's worth taking a look on Backblaze's blog. Now, Backblaze is what I used or replaced CrashPlan with, right? It's an online storage service. And they've always been really interesting because they've published the results they get because they're running thousands of hard drives, and they discussed the failure rate for their drives over time. There's really great reports on sort of the state of the hard drives. And part of the reason I found this article, this blog entry, kind of fascinating, it's Seagate's CTO talking about HAMR on Backblaze's blog. And the thing that kind of blew me away is that Backblaze has installed 100 petabytes of 10 and 12 terabyte drives. Like, I would love to know what percentage of total 10 and 12 terabyte drive production that was. And I think it'd probably be more terrifying if it wasn't a significant percentage. And we've talked about HAMR before. It's heat-assisted magnetic recording. But, you know, it's kind of fun to kind of look at what they're talking about delivering in 2019, like 5 terabits per square inch. And, you know, when you're talking about HAMR, you're talking about using heat on the magnetic coating on the surface of the disk and having to apply heat to be able to flip the bit and keep it from flipping back because they're packing them so densely together. They don't want them to impact each other. It's neighbors of each individual bit. But we're talking about 400 degrees Celsius. And they do a few magnetic grains, quote, for a very short time, like approximately 1 nanoseconds with a laser. So, you know, these next generation HAMR-based hard drives that Seagate's expecting to deliver in 2019 will have lasers inside them. Or as Alvin Malventano likes to say, frickin' lasers inside of them. I'm not sure he's ever said frickin', but I can completely hear it in my head.
Yeah.
You know, they'll be available by the end of 2018, what they call pilot volumes, which means enough to get potential massive customers online to test them. But, you know, it's pretty crazy. Seagate's built over 40,000 HAMR drives so far, volume shipment of 20 terabyte plus drives in 2019. And they're using the same assembly line as the current lineup of Seagate products. So they're not going to have to like tool up an entire process to build these new drives. So what's also pretty crazy is as they've been working on HAMR technology, they've been like 30% annual density growth over the past 9 years. So 2 terabit per square inch currently, and they're accelerating it as fast as they can. Single head data transfers of over 2 petabytes, exceeding real world expectations. So I just thought this was kind of fascinating to think about. And then if they're going to be moving on to the next generation of technology by like 2023, which is heated dot magnetic recording, which isn't nearly as fun to say as HAMR.
No,
but it's just, you know, I'm excited to have my 20 terabyte hard drives in my NAS, my laser NAS. This episode of This Week in Computer Hardware is brought to you by the Ring Video Doorbell, people. Ring's mission is to make neighborhoods safer, to keep your porch, well, in your view. It's pretty cool, man. The Ring Video Doorbells, it's 1 million people use the amazing Ring Video Doorbell to protect their homes, including Mr. Ryan Shrout, who also uses it to protect his business. The Ring knows home security begins at the front door, but it doesn't end there. And that's why they're extending that same level of security to the rest of your home with the Ring Floodlight Cam. It's like the Ring Video Doorbell. It's a motion-activated camera, but it's a floodlight, and it connects it all to your phone. With HD video and two-way audio, it lets you know the moment anyone steps on your property. and you can talk at them, see and speak to visitors, even set off an alarm right from your phone. And with Ring's floodlight cam, it's really easy. Something goes bump in the night, you'll know what it is. Is it the cat? Is it the neighbor's kid? Is it someone you should actually be terrified of? It's the good stuff, people. Whether you're home or away, the Ring Floodlight Cam lets you keep an eye on your home. And Ring Floodlight Cams offer the ultimate in home security with high visibility floodlights and a powerful HD camera that puts security in your hands. Named the Wall Street Journal's Best of CES 2017. It's good stuff. All kits include a Ring Video Doorbell and your choice of either 1, 2, or 3 floodlight cams in a Ring of Security kit. Connect your Ring Video Doorbell with your favorite smart locks and hubs for added convenience, monitoring, and security. With Ring, you're always home. Save up to $150 off a Ring of Security kit when you go to ring.com/Twitch. That's ring.com/Twitch. And we want to thank Ring for their support of This Week in Computer Hardware and for helping to keep Ryan's door safe. Yay. Have you had any like terrifying moments with the Ring? Like, you know, you fired up the doorbell camera and saw something nefarious going on? Or has it mostly been like the dogs trying to lick the camera?
No, nothing terrifying. The best story I have is, so I've had two of them. One of them is I got a notification. I looked at my phone. There was a kid standing by the garbage cans looking at his phone. And I answered it and I startled him, as you do, because he didn't realize there was a camera and a microphone there. I said, can I help you with something? And he said, no, this building was a Pokemon Go battle place or whatever. So he was playing Pokemon Go standing outside the building. And I said, okay, that's fine, whatever, moved on. And the other one I think I saw was I saw some probably underage kids pull a car into the parking lot and throw beer cans out the window and then drive on as well. So, that's the excitement that happens in northern Kentucky, I guess. Hard to complain about that.
Yeah, I was going to say that you could do worse.
That's true. Worse. Very true.
Yeah. You could have performed a citizen's arrest on the young hooligans pitching their beer cans.
Mm-hmm. Please halt. I will be there in 11 minutes.
I know we had somebody who kept dumping their garbage on our curb, and I thought, if I can just catch them, I'm going to glue that stuff to the hood of their car. And then they moved, and they stopped dumping garbage on the street, which was good. Much more interesting for a show about technology, though, is AMD's Radeon software Adrenalin, which has added in game overlay, mobile app, and wider API support. What's going on with Adrenalin?
So this is actually pretty cool. So this is their most recent, that they've since 2014 they've been doing these big annual software releases, which they add new features, new capabilities. In the beginning, it was a lot of performance improvements, but in the last couple of years, it's just been feature improvements, as they've been committing to doing performance improvements throughout the year, right? As games are released and that type of stuff. So it's better that way. But Adrenalin, which is spelled without an E, because it is not the drug coursing through your veins, but it is in fact named after the adrenaline rose, hence the red color, hence the Radeon brand, et cetera, et cetera. They added two big things and a whole set of other things, right? So I think the most interesting one is they've added something called the Radeon Overlay, which is while you're in game, you hit Alt-R and it pulls up an overlay over the game while you're playing. You stay in the game. It's not like Alt-tabbing out. It's not like minimizing your game or anything like that. It doesn't pause the game. It's still running in the background, so be cognizant of that. But it pulls up an overlay on the right-hand side where you can adjust the settings. You can address things like enabling FreeSync or enhanced sync. You can enable and play with things like Radeon Chill. You can enable monitoring, so you can look at your CPU utilization, GPU utilization, frame rate, memory utilization, all that stuff, and you can say like, I want to put it in which corner you want to put it in.
So basically, I can use this instead of fraps.
Yeah, you can. It doesn't have any. No, it does have logging capabilities in it as well. You can play with the relive stuff, right? Which is their streaming, recording, sharing stuff, all without leaving the game, all without having to, exit the game, restart it, go into settings, try something. And it's really novel way of doing it, right? And it works really well. It just kind of pops up. No performance impact. You hit escape or Alt-R again, and it goes away, and you can continue playing the game as you want. I'd like to see them add stuff like overclocking into that, but that's something I think they'll do in a future iteration. They added AMD Link, which is like a mobile app, which is interesting. if you want a second screen and you want to be able to monitor your system information that way, I think that's less useful than the overlay. But still, it's neat that they're expanding out these ideas. And then the other stuff that they've basically done is improved all these other existing features. So like frame rate target control is a feature that a lot of people use. It now supports Vulkan games, right? Radeon Wattman, which is its integrated overclocking and like power performance profiling system, now supports profiles that you can save to disk. So if your system crashes while you're doing something, you can restore it back to the state. You can share these profiles on the internet, right? You can just share a file with somebody and they can try to apply your power overclocking profile to their system for the GPU side. They've improved Enhanced Sync to now work on all GCN GPUs. They enhanced Radeon Chill to work on all games, not just a whitelist of a handful. So it's like a cool power saving measure that,
that's cool.
Not only does it work with all these games, but it has the potential to not be a perfect thing or something you might want to adjust. But because of Radeon Overlay, you can now adjust it while you're in game, and you don't have to worry about like, oh, I don't like the way it feels, or I want to lower the minimum frame rate from 40 to 30 or something like that. You can literally pull that up in the overlay and do it. So it's a significant software update for AMD. This is they're continuing their annual cadence, despite all of the stuff that has been going on at the AMD corporate offices and the Radeon Technologies Group and whatnot. So it's good to see that they're still doing that. And it really is, I don't know at what point I'll be able to say that people have the same confidence in the AMD Radeon drivers as they do NVIDIA drivers, but I feel like we're getting really close. And in some areas, the Radeon team has exceeded what the GeForce team has done in terms of adding new stuff to it, right? I think Relive is probably as good or better than the GFE live streaming capability now. I think the overlay is a much better way to interface with the driver that NVIDIA hasn't implemented yet. Radeon Chill is not perfect, but is a really cool idea and interesting way of lowering power consumption in cases where it's possible. And NVIDIA doesn't really have a solution for that. So AMD has done a fantastic job of keeping up in these spaces. Now, what they need to do is translate that into users and buyers and customers that then basically see these updates and commit that like, okay, I feel like AMD and the Radeon brand is doing right by me. I'm going to buy the next iteration of hardware. But you have to have good hardware in order for that next step to take place. So, it's all kind of adding together. It's just weird. We're in this weird spot where the AMD CPU group feels like they're doing better than the AMD GPU group. And now it kind of feels like the AMD software group is doing better than the AMD hardware group on the GPU side. So things have kind of twisted around a little bit, but it's a good release nonetheless. If you have an AMD card, it's available now. You can download it, the latest Adrenalin software update. So cool stuff.
I have just the all-in-one. I'm going to test that out on. Very excited. Synaptics unveiled Clear ID in-display fingerprint sensor technology, which basically means Synaptics, who probably made the touchpad in the laptop or has patents related to the touchpad in the laptop you use. They call themselves the Human Interface Solution Developer. They're everywhere. Like 5 billion units have been shipped, but where they are going to be next is their Clear ID in-display fingerprint sensor. So it will literally sit just under the screen and scan your fingerprint. More importantly, it will do it through a glass overlay and a screen protector, which sounds pretty cool to me, because that means you can eliminate the button or not put the button on the back of the phone, which I find incredibly irritating. But activates apparently only when needed, and will, quote, target larger areas in the future and eventually the entire display. So what you're looking at right there is the module itself, which seems kind of big in a world where, giant companies with all the engineering resources on the planet are telling us they can't fit a headphone jack. I will be curious to see if they have difficulties fitting that inside of the phone. So
this is clearly a feature that would have saved Apple. Like this basically enables you, if you want to do face recognition for authentication, if you want a bezel-less device, you can still put this underneath the screen. You don't have to worry about having a button specific for it on the front of it.
Right.
And it sees your fingerprint through the OLED, so it has to do a little bit more processing than normal because it has to see it through the grid of the OLED display itself. it only activates when an application or the operating system is asking for the activation, right? So I imagine like a little icon would show up, you put your finger on it and it works. And it's like, hey, if they'd had that on the iPhone 10, I'd be way more happy, I think, with the implementation that they have. This is something I think assuredly you'll see, like at CES, they're going to demo it. My guess is at MWC, when you see like the Samsung phones announced, they'll probably have this feature in there, probably coming from Synaptics. I don't know if Synaptics works with Apple or not. I think they do, but it wouldn't surprise me to see this in there as well in the next iterations of it. So cool stuff. Again, and it's just neat to think about, like, again, eventually they say we're going to get to the whole screen, right? So you can just literally put your thumb anywhere on the display when it asks you to validate, and it'll just know you. So sounds cool.
I like the idea of it just knowing and just working, which is much better. I find, because I've been using I have an iPhone 6. It's of a certain age now, and it's amazing how awkward the fingerprint sensor and the home button can be. Or finicky might be a better word for it. And when you're trying to open your phone, finicky, or having to hit like the screen again so you can get to actually enter in the PIN code is incredibly frustrating. So go Synaptics, make it all work better. Kind of a big deal. HP issued security patches for keylogger discovered in more than 460 laptop models, which I think means HP has taken over the oops crown from Lenovo. Although technically, I don't think this is going to be, this isn't like observing information for marketing purposes. It is an actual issue with a keylogger that was buried in the Synaptics touchpad drivers. Michael Ming was digging into the Synaptics touchpad software because he wanted to change the backlight on the keyboard, and then found the keylogger built into the software slack, which was there to debug errors. And was displayed by default. It was disabled by default, but an attacker was able to achieve administrative privileges, which is kind of crazy. We're talking about full, not just the touchpad, but all of the keystrokes on the keyboard being recorded. I know Tim wrote this up, but is there any reports that anyone has actually accessed this? This is like an interesting discovery, but I don't think it was a known vulnerability that had been exploited at this point.
I don't think so. I think when I'm reading this, it's more of like, so it's disabled by default. So somebody would have to have administrator privileges to your system to enable it, and then they would have to have an additional exploitation in order to get the data off of it. So the exploit doesn't, like, it's not sending data back to the cloud or something, it's saving it locally. So then somebody would have to have access to your machine a different way or another way in order to get that file off of the system, right? So I don't think it was something that was found in the wild, but who knows at this point. Obviously, if you're an attacker and that's been your exploit, you're not going to go out and brag about it necessarily if you've been getting useful data from it. So it's hard to really know for sure. But 460 machines is a lot to patch. So there is that.
460 models.
Not 460 machines, 460 different models of machines.
Right. G2, G4, G6, Elite X2, EliteBook, Thin Client ProBook, Spectre Pro Steam, X360, ZBook, mobile workstations, consumer devices with the compact Beats, Envy Omen Pavilion, Spectre Split Stream, and even the 15-inch Star Wars Special Edition laptop.
Empire's always watching.
So run Windows Update, people. It should be on automatically. But if you do that, it will be fixed. And there is a list of all of the affected laptops and the security patches on the HP support website. It's long. Props for HP about being upfront about this. It is a really long list. And the thing I love about the list is they have the fix next to everything. Man, it's a lot of laptops. Oh my goodness. WordPress. This episode of This Week in Computer Hardware is also brought to you by WordPress. We know that building something new, something that others connect with, is a lot easier with the right tools. We use WordPress.com every day. Let me tell you, whether you're looking to create a personal blog, a business site, or both, creating a website on WordPress.com helps others find you, remember you, and connect with you. Because the website, it's going to work. You don't need experience. You don't need to hire someone. WordPress.com guides you through the entire process from start to finish. They take care of the technical side, so it's easy to get your site up and running. They have hundreds of beautiful designs to choose from. You get built-in search engine optimization and social sharing. Their business plan lets you access hundreds of plugins and themes. Their customer support team is made up of WordPress experts eager to help you get the most from your site. They're available to help 24 hours a day, Monday through Friday, and weekends too. It sounds expensive, but it's not. Plans start at just $4 a month. And really, it's time to see why 29% of all websites run on WordPress, because it's good and it's got all the awesome plugins. And if you go to WordPress.com, you don't have to worry about managing it yourself, which is even better. Get started today with 15% off any new plan purchase. Go to WordPress.com/Twitch to create your website and find the plan that's right for you. That's WordPress.com/TWiCH for 15% off your brand new website. We want to thank WordPress for their support. I like WordPress. Oh my goodness. It's so much more useful than the other platform I was working on. Oh man, Intel shedding more light on the benefits of the Nervana Neural Network Processor. Does this mean Intel's now battling with NVIDIA, or does Intel? I mean, who's got the advantage in this sort of burgeoning world of online?
Well, NVIDIA has the definite advantage in the neural network processing, machine learning, AI stuff. They have a huge lead here. Intel bought this company called Nervana, Nervana. That is a deep learning startup. They bought them for $400 million, so they must have a lot of faith and value in what they're bringing. And they built a chip that is AI focused. It's based on tensor cores, right? The code name of the architecture is called Lake Crest. There's a huge tensor core structure to it. But the most interesting thing about it is that it uses something called flex point, which is a new. It's a new way of representing data that machine learning and AI structures will utilize, right? So it's quote from Tim's story. It allows Intel to achieve similar results to floating point 32 math with twice the memory bandwidth while being more power efficient than FP16. Flex point's used for the scalar math required for deep learning and uses fixed point 16-bit multiply and addition operations with shared 5-bit exponent. But unlike FP16, it uses all 16 bits to address space. The long story short is it's basically figuring out a way to dynamically adjust the size of the data based on the math that it's trying to do, right? And because of that, in some cases, it can be much more efficient performance per watt, and in other cases, it can be equal performance per watt than other tensor core based processors. Intel's working with guys like Facebook to really tweak their software for these types of applications. So it's really interesting to see what Intel kind of pushes forward with it. It uses HBM memory. It looks like kind of like a normal chip, but also note that Intel recently hired Raja Koduri, and they've made very specific claims that they're going to make a discrete GPU to address gaming and machine learning applications and workloads. So I'll be curious to see if this line. So Intel has their Xeon Phi, which is based on Larrabee. They have GPUs. They have their primary Xeon Scalables. They're building GPUs. They have Lake Crest. I feel like eventually they need to consolidate down into one, maybe two product lines that have a combined capability of some of these different systems at play. So I think right now, because they're behind in the space, they're just kind of, all right, what's the quickest thing we can get up and running now that will be relevant and get us, interest from media and from companies and organizations? And then what is our long-term plan to integrate these into a solution that actually addresses the workloads best? I think Nervana will be a piece of that, but I just don't know where it turns into the structure. It's really neat right now, but it's a super small run type thing that is as much a development platform as it is a real product at this point.
It happens. Man, big announcement this week. The iMac Pro went on sale today, and this is an interesting product. You can see you probably can actually see over my shoulder a Dell 7000 all-in-one PC. But the thing that was blowing me away, and we talked about this a couple weeks ago, is we're talking about an AMD Ryzen 1700 processor, 580 graphics, not barn burning, but certainly enough to make video editing functional on it. A 4K monitor, ton of storage, ton of memory, like up to 32 gigabytes of memory. And one of the defining factors of all-in-ones for years was that they were essentially taking what was often an underpowered mobile motherboard and stuffing it behind a monitor, which fits and is perfectly useful for basic office tasks or around the house computing. But lately, all-in-ones have been getting considerably more powerful, and they take off a very small amount of desk space. And if you've looked at Mac products over the last few years, you may notice they seem to make them smaller and more vertical, and maybe not as expandable internally, but they certainly want to minimize the footprint on your desk and bring in an aesthetic joy to it. So one of the things that came out in the last couple of weeks, Johnny Ives will be getting hands-on again with the design at Apple, which I'm curious to see how that's going to impact the launch of their products or what their products look like over the next couple of years. But one of the lines, I think Ars Technica said, quote, Apple compares the iMac Pro's performance favorably with that of the existing iMac, which is one of the oddest lines I've ever heard, because when has Apple ever introduced something that's not 84 times as fast and 22 times as cool? They're saying it's like 4 to 5 times faster than the existing iMac. 27-inch 5K panel, 5120 by 2880 pixels, P3 wide color gamut, 500 nits of brightness, which is pretty bright for a desktop panel. Then it's got a Xeon W inside of it, 8, 10, 14, and 18 core configurations. The 14 and 18 core models are going to show up in January. These are pretty crazy processors to put into something like this. Radeon Pro Vega 56 and 64 GPUs. So 32 gigabytes is the starting point for the memory. 64 and 128 gigabyte configurations are going to be offered. You start with a terabyte of SSD flash storage. No Fusion drive, and they can deliver 2 or 4 terabytes of storage inside of that. And unlike the MacBook Pro, there's not like a single Thunderbolt port, which I think is a sign that Apple can actually listen to its customers, and I hope they do. 4 Thunderbolt 3 ports, 4 USB 3 ports, a UHS 2 SD XC card slot, a 3.5 millimeter headphone jack, and 10 gigabit Ethernet. So the standard configuration is everybody sitting down, seated, braced for impact.
I am.
$4,999 with the 8-core CPU, 32 gigs of RAM, the Vega 56 with 8 gigs of memory, and 1 terabyte of storage. So, wow.
Yeah.
Oh,
indeed.
That AMD behind me is powered, all-in-one behind me is just looking more and more affordable each minute that goes by. And this is also, this is. You could argue whether or not the Xeon chips are necessary for a workstation class computer, but it has certainly been the differentiating kind of line that Apple drags out when they're justifying the cost of their hardware. As we put the mega processor in the professional items, not those foolish desktop processors that other filthy people use in their computers. But I got to say props to Apple for putting a metric ton of ports on it. I think it was a very, very wise move on their part. And I'm curious to see, where I see this, because this certainly has more than enough oomph to make a lot of video editors more than happy. So this episode of This Week in Computer Hardware is brought to you by Tracker. We're all looking for something. Love, purpose, unforgettable experiences, but mostly we're looking for stuff like our keys. Can't help you with love or purpose. But 8 years ago, Tracker changed everything about finding your keys when they released their first tracking device. And now they've done it again with the new Tracker Pixel. With Tracker Pixel, you'll never worry about losing your stuff again, people. Tracker Pixel is the lightest Bluetooth tracking device on the market. Place Tracker Pixel on whatever you tend to lose, your keys, your wallets, your backpack, your remote, that book your kid absolutely has to read once before falling asleep at night. It's small enough to fit in your smallest items. It's light. And when you misplace an item that has a tracker pixel attached, just go to the tracker app on your smartphone, press a button, a 90 decibel alert will help you find it in seconds. So hopefully the book isn't under your kid's pillow. It even has powerful LED lights so you can find your items in the dark. And if you lost your phone, just press the button on your tracker pixel. Your phone's going to ring even if it's on silent. You can even locate your item if it's miles away because every tracker user is part of the largest crowd locate network in the world. And Tracker's 30-day money-back guarantee means you truly have nothing to lose. See if you can keep from losing stuff. Try the Tracker, and it gets better. Tracker makes a great gift, and during this holiday season, save 20% off your order when you go to thetracker.com/Twitch. That's THETRACKR.com/TWICH for 20% off. Thetracker.com/Twitch. And we want to thank Tracker for their support of This Week in Computer Hardware. In surprising news that came late in the recording session of our podcast, CNET has announced that Amazon will start selling Apple TV and Google Chromecast. We were talking about this last week. Robert Heron and I were talking about it on our home theater podcast, AVXL. Just as Movies Anywhere brings us all together, or at least our movies, Google had threatened to pull YouTube from the Echo Show, and then pretty much everything else Amazon sold involving video, or at least with Amazon's name on it. This was in response to Amazon pulling Nest sales off of Amazon.com. And of course, like 2 years ago, they stopped selling Chromecast. So there's been this shot across the bow thinking, oh yeah, the Amazon Prime app's finally on the Apple TV. So I think, in a gesture of, oh dear God, let's not all go to war over this, Amazon has broken down and decided to start selling Apple TV and Google Chromecast on the website. So they are not actually for sale yet. I am curious myself to see whether or not they will show up for sale before Christmas. I will laugh if they don't show up until after Christmas, just because I think that's particularly obnoxious even for Amazon. But what's interesting for me is if I search for Chromecast, I still get a Fire TV stick as the first result. So... and a lot of Google Chrome clones from China. So we'll see. It probably takes a little while for everything to propagate through the glorious search engine that is Amazon.com, or that powers Amazon.com. But two versions of the Apple TV 4K, the Apple TV, Google Chromecast, and Chromecast Ultra, CNET says will all be available for sale shortly on Amazon.com. And part of me is like wondering, is this in response to Disney buying Fox? And they just don't want to have to battle with everyone simultaneously. I don't know. I'm curious to see where this all ends up. VESA introduces the new fully open display HDR standard for LCD displays. Most of the time when we hear VESA, it's like VESA mount. True. Are we talking about, Display HDR 1.0 is essentially going to lay down the HDR standards for laptops and desktops, which are technically a little bit different from, say, the HDR that's showing up in your television. Is that like kind of the gross oversimplification of this one?
No, that makes sense. And it's also interesting that they're breaking up into three different segments, right? Display HDR 400, 600, 1000. Which basically have slightly different minimum specs to meet them, right? I think the numbers very specifically represent the maximum brightness of stuff. Right?
Brightness is critical to HDR performance, and that's one of the things with HDR televisions. If you have a less expensive machine that doesn't deliver the light you need, it's hard to hit those highs, if you don't have the nits to back them up. Right.
So I think it says in here actually that like display, where does it say about 200? The space drivers, the space drivers are fully open and transparent standard, automated tools that end users can download, which is actually really cool. You can be able to download these tools and verify the results on your hardware, which is actually pretty cool. It's something I haven't really ever seen that from one of these spec standards before. So like, for example, the display HDR 400 represents a minimum entry level of HDR with 400 nits brightness, 8-bit color depth, HDR10 support, and global dimming. Whereas you go up to 600 and 1000, it's 10-bit, 2-bit dithering at a minimum, 1000 nits, regional backlighting as opposed to global backlighting, right? So I think it's a good step, right? The complication is that there's seemingly dozens of these different kind of HDR and higher color, higher caliber image quality standards that have been created, from Dolby Vision to HDR10 to Ultra HD Premium that was announced, and there's all kinds of stuff. We just I need someone like Robert to sit down and make a table of all of this. Here's what this means. Here's what this means. Here's the ones that can run on the same displays. Here's the ones that are opposing each other. I think that would be a really useful resource for me and for everybody, really, to figure out what all this is going to mean. I think at some point it has to condense down. It has to consolidate into something that makes a little bit more sense. When I go to Best Buy or Amazon, I can buy a TV with a logo on it and be confident in what I'm going to get.
Well, fortunately, a lot of this stuff is actually updatable in firmware, because I was recording AVXL with Robert earlier today, and one of the interesting things that came out is discussing what's going on with it's DirecTV is going to distribute, or I should say, they're going to shoot and broadcast the first 4K HDR hockey game. And what makes that kind of crazy is they're actually using HLG they're using HLG hybrid log gamma to actually transmit the data, right? Because the problem with HDR, and I'm going to go deep in the weeds quickly, so I'll stop before I get going. But HLG is technically a competitor to Dolby Vision and HDR10, except it's not. It was put together by NHK and the BBC because the metadata required for HDR10 and Dolby Vision was great in packetized environments or IP-based environments like the internet, but is a nightmare to implement in broadcast, because if the HDR data gets out of sync with the actual signal, then you're going to have the brightness and the darkness or the contrast settings are going to be all messed up as you roll along. And that's yeah, we can put together something to talk about the different specs. But the other thing is there's been specs that have been announced that are probably never going to go anywhere except for very particular branded relations on branded TVs with content that may never actually exist anywhere. So we can talk about this at CES because that was one of the surprises of CES 2017 was people announcing what I will now affectionately call obscure technologies to create HDR that never really had any real world traction. Maybe exaggerating slightly, but not too much on that one. I don't know. It'll be fun to watch. I'm curious to see, because I've run into a lot of vendors talking about their computer monitors as being HDR, and it's like, well, okay, now I've got to do an HDR 4K content to this device to figure out if it's actually displaying HDR that's usable for content, or is it a high dynamic range that's specific to applications that don't necessarily use it in the computing environment itself. So, base is a good place to start to get standards on things. AMD's partnered with Qualcomm for always connected Ryzen mobile PCs. When are the Ryzen mobile PCs going to ship?
They're at Best Buy now. Now, I don't think it has Snapdragon X16 modems in it, but I actually have one at the office. I don't have it within reaching distance, but we have one here that's being tested. So they are available. This announcement was kind of like the surprise at Qualcomm. Not a huge deal here. Basically, they're just saying that the Qualcomm Snapdragon LTE modems are going to support the Ryzen mobile platforms. They actually, AMD said that in their reference platforms that they sent out to all their OEMs, they actually included these modems on there, right? To emphasize the fact that that they function with this. You should try to include these if you can, which is interesting, right? Because it just shows Qualcomm is working with everybody in that way. They want to make sure connectivity and mobility is universal as they can, I guess. So it'd be interesting to see which AMD platforms integrate it, right? Because the general idea that AMD is still trying to get past is that AMD is the low battery life but higher performance notebook solution, right? And so when you think of lower battery life, you're not thinking of mobility and always connected because you don't really care. You're always tethered to something anyway. But they need to get past that. They need to prove that these products they're building aren't required or aren't holding them down in that way. So I think, making sure that they are keeping lockstep with Intel in terms of these higher end, more niche features makes sense. And Qualcomm gets another place to sell modems to.
There are worse things than having another place to sell modems to, especially if you're Qualcomm.
Especially if you sell modems. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So I know there's stuff you've talked about with vendors under NDA that you can't talk about. One of the questions I got the other day from a friend of mine is Ryzen 2 going to arrive in February? Is there anything you can say about that?
It's not. So the best you could hope for is some kind of revision of Ryzen, some kind of little lockstep move forward, right? But you're not going to see the next architecture at launch at CES or anything like that, right? So the Zen 2 architecture is probably maybe the end of 2018, probably early 2019, something like that. But you'll see, little tweaks of, hey, we've improved our process tech, we've improved our binning, we've improved our clocking capabilities. So you might get a little extra speed out of these parts. But the good thing is that AMD had, at least previously, we hope they stick to it, but previously said that, they're going to support these parts in their current motherboards and platforms and sockets and whatnot too. So that would be nice.
That would be nice. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Anything you're looking forward to at CES, or are you just trying to survive at this point? I mean, AMD is doing briefings, NVIDIA is doing briefings, Intel will be there somewhere.
Yeah, I think based on the last weeks of emails and discussions I've had, there's going to be more at CES than I expected there to be in terms of new product. I think AMD is going to have new stuff to show. I think Intel is going to show, they announced the Kaby Lake plus AMD graphics solutions. We're going to see notebooks based on that at CES, which I'm really excited to see. I don't know what NVIDIA is doing. I don't feel like they're going to launch any consumer products really at CES. I think they might hold that until towards end of winter, beginning of spring timeframe. So we'll have to see if there's any. I don't feel like we're going to have any big GPU news, but I think we'll have more CPU news than I had originally expected. And then getting a little bit of tidbits of information from HP and Dell about what their consumer products are going to be launched and announced look pretty cool. So. I still haven't made any meetings or anything yet for CES, but I plan to be there and experience as much as I can, I'll say.
Oh my goodness. I already have 2 days booked at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah. I cover a slightly broader swath though, so maybe that's the issue. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Robert Hare and I are going to be there taking a look at the new television technology. I think it's going to be interesting to watch TCL and Samsung and LG, primarily Samsung and LG, and to a lesser degree TCL, battling it out to see who's got the TVs of choice. Obviously, I think Samsung and Sony and LG will be competing at the high end level, where TCL is going to be. I want to see if they can do another amazing 55, 60-inch television, delivering the outrageous feature set for the money that they did with the 55-inch television this year. But we wait with the breath that is bated. With that, ladies and gentlemen, that's an odd one even for me. TWiCH is the name of the show. twit.tv/TWiCH is the website to get all the information on how to enjoy the show, subscribe to the show, or get all the older links to the show. If you've enjoyed the witty stylings of Mr. Ryan Shrout, you can find his website, which is full of all the witty stylings and incredible benchmarking you might want for computer hardware, at pcper.com. You can find me over at tekthing.com or avexcel.com. It's a weekly tech show I do and a weekly podcast about home theater and audio. And I would enjoy you to try either one of those and PCPer, and of course the rest of the offerings on the Twit network at twit.tv. Thank you all so much for watching. I'm Patrick Norton.
I'm Ryan Shrout.
We'll see you next week on TWiCH.